If not,
Yeah.
everyone will. Uh, everyone can watch it in retrospect, and
Yeah.
we can be your live audience, Shola.
No
So,
problem. No problem. Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, and assembled company wherever you are and wherever you're listening in whichever time zone, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe. And tonight, it is with enormous pleasure I introduce the one and only, the magnificent Shola Story. Please put your hands together. Shola, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John. And with that introduction, I hope I can do that introduction justice. So, yes, people, I say to you Hashima in Swahili, which means respect. And I'm really honored and actually happy, full of joy to be invited on here today to tell stories because if you speak to most of the storytellers I know, if you ask what really makes them tick, what makes their heart sing, it's actually telling stories. So being able to do this is a wonderful thing, and I appreciate it a lot. So I'm going to tell you two stories today: a short story and a slightly longer story, but on a theme. The theme that I'm interested in today is largely because I've been reading a book called White Supremacy and Me, and it's by a woman whose name I've forgotten. Her name ends with Ali, and it may be Azad Ali. Anyway, I'll tell you at the end. But she has developed a series of questions and a series of statements, along with some breakdowns on what actually makes white supremacy so stickable. And I thought that the story that I want to tell you has some resonance around that. So I'd like to use these stories to unpick a little bit of my own views around white supremacy and how this can potentially change the world if we change the narrative. So the first story is a story called That's Why. This was told to me by a fellow storyteller and a friend of mine called Odiri Igamri. Is a Nigerian storyteller from many moons ago, actually. And the story goes like this. So, in a place far from here, but near to there, two brothers were talking and they had decided that one of the things that they wanted to do was to meet the king. Not only to meet the king at some unspecified time in the future, but to meet the king tomorrow. So that next day, that is exactly what they did. They set off down the road and along the boulevard where the palace lay to meet the king. And they got to the gates of the palace. And the guard standing on the door of the palace, on the gate of the palace, said, "What do you want?" They said, "Well, we want to meet the king." And the guard said, "Meet the king? Don't make me laugh. Away with you and don't waste my time again." And so the brothers turned around and started to walk away. But the older brother said, hmm, that's why. And the younger brother said, "That's why what?" But all the older brother would repeat was, "That's why." The younger brother was baffled, as I'm sure you are. The next day, they went again because these were tenacious brothers and they were not going to give up because of one defeat. Once again, they went down the road and along the boulevard, but this time they met the captain of the guards leading a cavalcade and with the king's carriage behind them. And the captain of the guard said, "Stop, halt, where do you think you're going?" "Well, we want to meet the king. We want to meet the king of our kingdom and talk to him." "You want to meet the king? Don't you know that that's not possible without an appointment? Look, just go away. Maybe try and make an appointment or something, but be gone." So the two brothers, they turned around and they carried along their way. And the older brother said, that's why. The younger brother said, that's why what? That's why. What? But the older brother just repeated the same thing. That's why. The next day, because of their determination, they went back along the road and along the boulevard. And this time they met the captain of the guard and the carriage. And the captain of the guard said, you again? Then looked back at the king to see if the king was listening. And the king poked his head out of the carriage and said, what is it? And the captain of the guard said, well, these two, they keep coming. They really want to see you, your majesty. And the king said, well, then let them see me. And so the two brothers sat beside the king in the carriage and had a pleasant conversation, talking about the vagaries of the kingdom, the ups and downs and what happened and so on and so forth. And eventually they left the king, both smiling, and waved and left. And as they were walking, the older brother again said, that's why. And the younger brother said, please tell me, that's why what? And this time the older brother did tell him. He said, well, you see, the guard thinks like a guard. That's why he is a guard. The captain of the guard thinks like a captain of the guard. This is why he is a captain of the guard. And the king thinks like a king. That's why he is a king. So the story is plainly about the way in which we inhabit the landscape, the emotional, physical, political, spiritual landscape that we think about mostly, that we believe applies to us. That landscape or thoughtscape which resonates most clearly with us, therefore becomes us, if you like. So I had said that I wanted to talk about white supremacy in some degree. And really, if we live in a universe in which people believe that they are better than other people based on culture, race, skin color, ethnicity, etc., then the universe in which they inhabit will correspond to those beliefs. And so we have a system that is predicated on an illusion, the illusion of white supremacy, white superiority, in which the brown and dark-skinned people of this earth are led to believe and are perceived as inferior, being somehow more animalistic. The culture of those people, particularly the indigenous cultures, being less sophisticated, less civilized, more primitive, and even monkey-like or ape-like. So that's that story. Whatever anybody thinks of the conclusions that I've made, the idea of inhabiting a thoughtscape based on those ideas which we hold dearest is one which I am more than happy to discuss with anybody who wants to do that. And then the next story is a story that I like a lot. And this is because this story has an ending that might not be the ending that we look for when we hear the substance of the story. So I'll begin to tell it. It goes once again. Oh, by the way, I must tell you that every time you hear me tell a story, you are very likely to hear me say, in a place far from here, but near to there. So when I say it, if you would like to do it in a call and response way, so that when I say in a place far from here, you say, but near to there, please feel free. So in a place far from here, but
near to there.
The animals were in consternation. You see, every time it rained, the small animals, they would drown. And so leopard Leopard, who was somewhat of a leader, called all the animals together and said, listen, we need to build a shelter. That is the only way that we can prevent the smallest and the weakest amongst us from dying. But we need to do this together because I cannot do it by myself. Are you in? And all the animals said, yes, apart from Duck. Duck said, I like water and rain, and I'm not helping to build a shelter because I'm very happy on my pond. And Dog said, I'm a dog and I live in a cave. I have nothing to do with shelters. Now there's something you should know. See, dog had teeth. Dog had claws and was in fact the only animal with teeth and claws at that time. Leopard was happy with that situation. He said, okay, if you want to go, go. Anybody else? The rest of the animals were more than happy to build the shelter. And build the shelter they did. And because they all did it together, they built the shelter very quickly. And the next time it rained, all the animals were dry, but more importantly, the small animals, the voles, the mice, the squirrels, they were okay. The lizards of various kinds, they were fine. They did not drown. Leopard's shelter, as they began to call it, was so successful that animals from neighboring lands began to be interested in this. And they called Leopard to help them to build a shelter. And Leopard went away to build this shelter. Now, when Leopard was away, not only did it rain, but it poured. And then it rained. Then it poured. Then it rained again and poured and rained and poured and rained and poured and rained. And Duck was happy on her pond, which was now a small lake, quacking about, just enjoying herself. Dog was in his cave. He was not really enjoying himself. You see, he was in a cave with that situation where the water travels along the ceiling and dropped, and it landed on Dog's head. So Dog moved, and the water landed on his head again. So he moved again. The water landed on his head. Dog became enraged. He said, I'm going to the shelter. So Dog began to run to the shelter. And as he approached the window, Goat stuck her head out of the window and said, you can't come in because you didn't help to build the shelter. But Dog had what? Dog had teeth. So Dog jumped in through the window and he began to bite that poor goat up and down. And then threw Goat out of the window, turned to the other animals and said, get out. And because Dog had teeth, the animals left the building. And that's exactly how they were when Leopard returned. He saw them rain-sodden upon the muddy ground and said, what are you doing? Why are you outside the shelter? And they told Leopard exactly what had happened. Leopard said, don't worry, I'll fight that dog. This Leopard was very courageous and did not care that Dog had teeth. So Leopard leapt in through the window and began to wrestle with Dog. But Dog had teeth. And Dog bit Leopard up and down until Leopard could stomach it no more and leapt out of the window and turned to the rest of the animals and said, listen, we can defeat Dog just as we built the shelter. We can defeat him together. If we all join together, he has no chance. But Monkey said, me? Me fights that dog? with his teeth? I don't think so. And Monkey went over to Dog and said, may I be the first to welcome you, Your Majesty. Dog liked that a lot. Leopard did not. Dog turned to the other animals and said, what about the rest of you? And one by one, each one of them bowed to Dog and called him their Majesty. Leopard was left out in the rain, whilst the rest of the animals stayed within the shelter that Leopard had helped to build. It was a sad state of affairs. Leopard, miserably sodden in the rain, and the animals cheerful. Well, not all of them were cheerful, because some of them were feeling a little bit guilty, but they were there with Dog, like so many of us do when we are feeling overwhelmed by somebody of superior strength, whether physically, mentally, or spiritually. So they stayed inside the shelter. Leopard stayed outside the shelter. And Leopard was so sad, but Dog was still not satisfied. You see, Leopard still looked too much like a leader to him. So Dog said to Monkey and Goats, go bring that leopard to me. Monkey and Goats went out. They didn't feel confident. So instead of approaching Leopard, they took stones and they threw the stones at Leopard. Leopard's mood changed from sadness to anger. Leopard looked at Goats, looked at Monkey, then turned away from them and began to run. And he ran towards the mountain and he kept running. And at the bottom of the mountain, where the thorn bush stood in all its glory, Leopard said, thorn bush, lend me your thorns for my paws so that I may have claws. And the thorn bush said, why would you want such a terrible thing? Because of Dog. And Leopard told the thorn bush all about Dog. And the thorn bush said, okay, I will give you these thorns, but you will regret it all. It's not going to be nice. Leopard did not care. Leopard ran further up the hill. He ran to the hut of the blacksmith and said to the blacksmith, 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 make me some teeth that I may have teeth. And the blacksmith said, why would you want such a terrible thing? Leopard told the blacksmith about Dog. The blacksmith agreed, but said, it's not going to be easy after this, you know. Eh? Are you sure? Leopard said, I'm sure. The blacksmith made Leopard teeth. Leopard continued to run up the mountain with his teeth and claws to the very top of the mountain, whereupon he looked up into the sky and into the thunderstorm and shouted, thunder, thunder, lend me your roar. And Thunder said, my roar? Why would you want such a terrible thing? And Leopard told Thunder all about Dog. And Thunder agreed and said, I will do it, but it's not going to be nice for you after this. Leopard was not interested. He took the roar. He had his claws, he had his teeth and his roar, and he turned and began to run down the mountain now, down the mountain, all the way to the shelter, whereupon he jumped into the window of the shelter with his new teeth, his new claws, and his new roar. And he began to claw Dog and bite Dog, roaring in Dog's ears, and threw Dog out of the shelter. Then Leopard turned to the other animals and said, get out! The animals left the shelter quickly. When they were assembled in the rain outside the shelter, Leopard said, knock it down. Monkey said, but I have made a mistake. You are the Majesty. Please allow us to welcome you. Please don't let us knock it down. It is what is keeping us safe. Leopard said, knock it down or I will kill you. The animals knocked the shelter down quick because Leopard looked fearsome, and his rage was even worse expressed in his powerful roaring voice. They knocked down the shelter. Then Leopard looked at them and said, run! If I see you again, I will kill you and eat you. And the animals scattered. And of course, as we know, to this very day, Leopard lurks in the trees, waiting for the animals, the ones who betrayed him, to come below him. And when he sees them, he jumps down and finishes them and eats them, as he has done since that day and will probably continue to do until the sun sets and rises no more. As for Dog, Dog went to Hunter's house, knocked on the door in a doggy sort of way. Hunter opened the door, said yes, and Dog said, if you let me hunt for you, I'll show you where all the animals are. I'll be your dog. And Hunter said, that sounds like a good idea. Sit, boy, sit. And from that day, Dog became man's best friend. That's the end of that story. Thank you. I would just like to say that that story is about what happens when somebody has the illusion of superiority. It may well be that they have superior weaponry like the teeth and the claws of Dog. It may be that they have the mindset of conquest like Dog. But superiority should not and cannot be measured in terms of material things. Superiority should actually, in my view, be measured in terms of how compassionate one can be, how civilized in terms of being able to live together, work together, to have integrity amongst each other, to share, and to, for example, practice the African principle of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are, and we are because I am. These are the things that make superiority actually a superfluous and meaningless word. Because if I am because we are, I cannot be superior to us because I am us. So therefore, whatever my skills, whatever my unique nature and characteristics are, no matter how amazing they may be, they are in service of all of us, and all of us have our uniqueness in service of all of us. That way, white supremacy becomes a nonsense. But let us not make the mistake of thinking that because I say white supremacy, I mean that white supremacy is the only ill that humans face. The supremacy of humanity over the environment is also an issue. The belief that the animals are ours to do with what we will, to put makeup in their eyes, to inject them with viruses, and to do all kinds of things to animals just because they do not speak. To imagine that they are not sentient amongst themselves, when if you've ever looked into the ears of a cow, into the eyes of a cow when it's about to be killed, you will know that that cow knows it's about to be killed. That is sentience. So all of these things are really important for us to consider in this time as to where do we go from here. We have been shown this year, almost we've been granted the blessing of being able to pause, to stop, to see that when we stop, the dolphins return to the rivers in Venice, that swans walk across airports, that the animals come back tentatively, saying to themselves, oh, these beasts are no longer around. But imagine what animals think of us. Hmm? We're like the demons and the vampires in the movies to animals. Really, if I was an animal anyway, that's what I would think. But then, because we do that to ourselves. We do it to animals. White supremacy has become a thing in the last 400-500 years or so, and it's crumbling. It's an edifice which is not sustainable because it's based on an illusion and lies. And the more in which people start to understand about the civilizations of Africa and the contributions that Africans made to civilization, to human civilization, long before that of Europe, then people start to understand that it can't be true. What we're hearing can't be true. It's not possible for Tarzan to be the savior of Africa. It's not possible because Africans live there. It's not possible for Columbus to be the discoverer of a place where there are already people. These things don't really make sense. And so I say these things hoping to add to a narrative of liberation and freedom that ultimately will help all of us to evolve to a place where we can truly be, that word, civilized together and move into a different place as humanity. So that's the meaning of my story.
I think that's kind of what that story is about. I first came across it back in the 80s. I think Chevy wrote it down and put it in a little book. And I used to go down to. I ran a bookshop in the 80s,
Oh, yeah.
And because it was kind of difficult to get stuff, directly from Africa without it going through a London filter. Go down to the Third World and Radical Book Fair every year down in Ealing Town Hall, I think it was, and I used to stock up from the publisher, from African publishers that had stalls there, and I bought that story in a beautifully illustrated little, almost like a pamphlet. The soft color, but I think it was a Chevy wrote it down, and it was, but it is the most fantastic story about working together and kind of what happens if you don't, if you kind of betray yourself and those around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, how's the time? You haven't got another story for us, have you?
Yeah,
yeah. I think we'll love the discussion in on the 12th. I think it's Monday the 12th. On Monday the 12th, where Shola's going to be with Yusuf Jallo, and they're going to be talking about African stories, and there'll be other people on that. But for right now, I'd like another story from Shola.
And you will have one. You will have one. So this story is called How the Desert Came to the Earth, and it's an adaptation of an Anansi story. It was created by a friend of mine called Batekun, which funnily enough means leopard, actually. In I think in Batekun, that's actually Yoruba. Because leopard in Yoruba is Amotekun. Batekun kind of means like father of the leopard. Anyway, that's his name. And he wrote this story down and asked me to perform this story and to narrate the story over a microphone. So I wasn't performing it, I was narrating it. This was before I ever told a story in a professional capacity. And it's actually the very first story that I ever told as somebody who called themselves a storyteller. And for about 1 year, it was the only story I told because I felt that I knew I could tell that story or this story, but I wasn't confident that I could tell other stories. So this story was my initiation into performance storytelling, so to speak. And it's called How the Desert Came to Earth. Now, if you'll just bear with me, I'm just going to turn off the phone that I can hear pinging behind me because I don't want it to interfere with this story again. So just bear with me. I hope that works. So, once again, in a place far from here, but near to there. There were two farmers. Their names were Winchi, who was a crane, and Abetz, who was a praying mantis. Now, these two farmers had everything that you can possibly imagine on their farms. They had yams and plantain, bananas and apples, oranges, and you can think of other things that they may have had, because whatever you think of, they had it there. Their produce was so expansive that people came from miles around to sample the food on their farms. And consequently, they were very rich. And this made them quite happy too. Now, one day, a terrible thing happened. You see, the rain stopped falling. When the rain stopped falling, the plants, of course, began to die. And the animals too began to suffer from thirst, and some of them even died. Now, Winchi was a smart young woman, and Winchi flew up and up and up into the sky, seeking the palace of Nyame, which is the Akan word for God. And Winchi flew and flew, looking for the palace of Nyame, and eventually found the palace and came into Nyame's presence and bowed. And Nyame sat on his throne and said, Winchi, what is it that you want? Well, Nyame, all the rain on my farm has stopped. The plants are dying. The animals are dying. Please, please give me rain. Well, Winchi, because you have asked me so nicely and traveled so far, I will give you what you ask for. Go and seek Nu, my rainmaker. Tell him that I, Nyame, sent you. He will give you rain. So Winchi thanked Nyame and went back into the bush looking for the rainmaker, and eventually found him taking a rest from the heavy task that he had been given. Because if you think making rain for the whole world is an easy task, you better think again. So Nu said, I know you want rain, huh? Okay. Take a stick from over there, tap me on the back 3 times, you will have rain. So Winchi flew, picked up the stick, and tapped the rainmaker on the back 3 times. Okay, go back to your farm. That's where the rain is. There's no point staying here. So Winchi thanked the rainmaker and flew back to her farm. When she reached her farm, she was happy. No. She was jubilant. No, she was ecstatic, because on her farm there was rain. So she said, rain, rain, rain on my farm. There's rain, rain, rain on my farm. You can do it if you like. Rain, rain, rain on my farm. Yeah, rain, rain, rain on my farm. She was so happy, but on Abet's farm, do you think there was rain? There was not. And Abet was not happy about it at all. So Abet came to Winchi and said, Winchi, tell me, how is there rain on your farm, but none on mine? I don't like it. What did you do? And when she said, well, it's very simple. I went to Nyame and I asked for the rain, and he told me to find the rainmaker. And the rainmaker gave me rain. I just tapped the rainmaker on the back 3 times. But don't forget, before I did this, now Winchi was about to say that before I did this, I asked permission from Nyame Well, do you think Abet was listening to that? Abet went off immediately, storming into the bush, looking for the rainmaker. Where is that rainmaker? I want the rainmaker. Where is that rainmaker? Abet found the rainmaker, taking a rest from the heavy task that he had been given. But Abet did not ask any questions. Abet picked up the biggest stick he could actually lift and began to beat the rainmaker. I want rain! Give me rain! I said rain! And he beat that rainmaker until the rainmaker was still. At which point, as many of us do, he realized the mistake he had made after the event. Abet began to slap the rainmaker's face to wake him up. Wake up, wake up. Oh, oh yeah, what have I done now? Oh no. I'm going to be severely punished. Abet had a sneaky idea. He lifted the body of the rainmaker and carried it to the top of the tree. Climbed the tree and posited the body right at the top of the canopy and climbed down. Then went to see Winchi and said, Winchi, my old friend, at the top of that mango tree there, there are plenty of juicy mangoes, but I cannot fly. If you would just fly to the top, shake it, the mangoes will fall down and we can both feast. Winchi, who was very friendly, said, okay. So Winchi flew to the top of the tree, shook the tree, and of course, mangoes fell down and something else too. Bodoof. The body of the rainmaker. And Abet looked up the tree at Winchi and said, oh, Winchi, look what you've done. You've killed the rainmaker. Hey, listen, if I was you, I would fly far away. Nyame is going to be very angry. Don't you know that's his own rainmaker? If I was you, go. Don't worry. I will tell Nyame. I will make it so that you will get far away before he knows. Go. Now, Winchi was equally as clever and tricky as Abet. So Winchi said, okay, and flew away. And a short while later came back with the ant people who are very, very good at carrying things. And so they did. They lifted the body of the rainmaker and began to carry the body of the rainmaker away. And at this point, Abet said, what are you doing? Why are you taking the rainmaker? Are you mad? Well, said Winchi, I went to see Nyame and I told Nyame what I had done, that I had killed the rainmaker. And Nyame said to me that he was very happy with me because he did not like the rainmaker anyway. He considered him to be useless. And he told me that if I brought the rainmaker to him, he would give me a reward. Abet heard the word reward. Everything else went out of his mind. He said, reward? Winchi, I am the one that killed the rainmaker. Any reward is mine. Go. Winchi flew away smiling along with the ant people. And Abet carried the body of the rainmaker to Nyame and threw the body ignominiously in front of Nyame and said, hey, there's your rainmaker, you useless rainmaker. As you can see, he's dead. And Abet kicked the rainmaker so that Nyame saw. He's very dead and I want my reward. Abet, you come to me with the body of my rainmaker, and you say you want your reward. You shall have your reward. And so saying, Nyame took lightning from his back and cast the lightning at Abet. Abet fell to the ground and came round a little while later. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was back on his own farm. But around him, for miles as far as the eye could see, was only sand. Sand and more sand. And that is the story of how the deserts came to earth. The
Sola, that's wonderful. Thank you very much for that set. And well, wherever you are, however you're watching, we can't see you, but I'm sure you're clapping. And you can also show your appreciation. If you go to the website, you will see a little hat. And as is traditional, that we should make a contribution to the teller. And and I'm sure Sola would appreciate that.
I won't say
it aids eating.
It does aid eating and liking.
Aid to eating.
That's correct. Yes.
So Sola, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for those 3 stories. And I was I really hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard that leopard one, and I knew the story, but I hadn't heard it told, and that was fantastic. So it was a personal treat.
Good.
So thank you, and
treating each other.
Yeah. So we'll see you again on the 12th. On Monday the 12th with Yusufu. For the African story, the discussion on African stories, which and I think Baden's going to be there.
I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be.
I think it's going to be a great night. We'll really push it out. Well, I pushed out this. I mean, but I think we're clashing with a festival, storytelling festival in Ireland. So, but people will see this at other times. So, fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Can I just ask, John, as well, that if people would put some answers to this question, like what does that desert represent? What does that desert represent? That's just a question I'm going to leave people with. What is it?
Yes, and they can tell you on the 12th the answer. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's very. In fact, I think that's the thing about traditional stories, is that they're timeless, because you can say, oh, they're about now, they're about then, they're about now, they're about what will be, and they show they show us different paths. If we go down this path, it's not moralistic, it's practical. It's
That's right, yeah.
If you go down this path, it might work. It stands a chance. If you go down that path, you had it. And that's universal in stories right around the world.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. So thank you.
You're most welcome, and thank you.
Brilliant.
Take care, John. I'll see you on the 12th.
See you on the 12th. Bye-bye.